The desert held its breath, a sky the color of old bone. Wind hummed over the low hills and the empty road that ran like a scar through scrub and stone. She had been running for 3 days, not a sprint, not a blind panic, a steady, stubborn flight. Her name was Elara Wynn, and the dust loved her in a way people never had. She rode a bay mare that favored the left hind hoof. Her saddle was patched in 2 places. A canteen knocked her hip. Her throat burned. Her eyes stayed sharp. Behind her, a trail. Thin, broken by rock. Still a trail. He had a way of finding trails no one else could read. The towns whispered about him, said he was half shadow, said his patience could outlast mountains. His name was Cassian Holt. Folks called him Cash, but the name fit him less than the silence did. He hunted with care. He hunted like a prayer that had learned to walk. Elara knew he was back there. She felt him the way a deer feels a storm. Not loud, inevitable. A low ridge lifted ahead. On its far side lay a dry riverbed, braided and white. Beyond that, a stand of cottonwoods that still remembered water. She took the ridge at a lean. Hoofbeats rang. Stone jumped sideways. The sun pressed against the back of her neck. At the top, she pulled the mare and looked behind her. The horizon was empty. Heat shook the air. Far off, a hawk hung on a string of light. She listened anyway. Nothing but wind. She breathed. She told herself she had time. She told herself to make the time. The mind tries to be brave when the heart is tired. She crossed into the riverbed and led the mare among the chalky channels. Hoofprints broke in powder. She walked in the shadows of dry roots and buried reeds. She followed the white curve north until the bed opened to a small basin. There, an old campsite, a ring of stones, a black circle of ash. She knelt and sifted the ash with 2 fingers, cold, days old. She fed the mare a handful of oats. She drank 2 slow swallows. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Then she listened again. Still only wind. Still that hush that comes before something is named. He watched her from a shoulder of rock above the basin. He had come from a different angle, reading the land as if it had spoken for her. Cassian Holt had eyes the color of creek glass and a jaw dark with late-day stubble. Dust had settled in the seams of his coat. A coil of rope lay over his saddle horn. He had not taken it for what it could do. He had taken it because the desert taught him to carry everything he might need. He did not move. He simply waited, and in that waiting his breath slowed to match the quiet basin. Elara straightened. She turned a little, as if a thought had tapped her shoulder. Her body knew before her mind did, the way shadows change when something more than wind approaches. She did not reach for the revolver on her hip. She knew better than to make the first movement angry. She ran a hand along the mare's neck, a gesture as old as fear. The air shifted. A pebble clicked on stone. She looked up to the shoulder of rock and saw him there, horse and rider cut from the same patient dusk. His voice came down the slope, low, even, a voice meant for firelight. "Elara," he said, "it has been a long way." She let the name pass through her like heat. Then she answered, "It is longer yet, if you plan to walk it in front of me." He did not smile. There were men who used smiles like tricks. He was not one. He was the kind of man who folded his smiles and put them away before sleeping. "I do not plan to hurt you," he said. "I plan to finish what I was hired to finish." The word hired touched the basin and stayed there. Money had set him on this trail, but money was not the only thing that kept a man riding when nights grew colder than prayers. She took a slow breath. "I am not a rabbit, Mr. Holt. I am not running because I like the taste of fear." "Then tell me why," he said. She picked up the canteen, but she did not drink. He would watch the motion of her throat. He would count the seconds between her breaths. A hunter measures a story by the places it goes quiet. "I left because some men do not hear no," she said, "because a ledger can be a mask, because in the back room of a fine office the floor can still be dirt." Something moved in his eyes, not pity, recognition. He had walked rooms like that. He had known doors that closed too softly to be trusted. "Who?" he asked. She told him the name. It landed between them like a nail. "Mr. Archer Vale." His jaw shifted, a small motion, tight as a knot tied right. "I know his kind," he said. "Then let me keep moving," she said. "Let the desert take my shadow and make it thin." He looked over the white braid of riverbed and the road beyond the ridge. He weighed things she could not see. Men like him kept a ledger inside. It counted blood, it counted hunger, it counted what a person deserved to keep. "If I let you ride," he said, "what keeps him from sending 3 others after you?" "Nothing," she said, "except the map. They do not know the way I ride. They do not know I learned from a woman who crossed the Sierra with a child on her back." He looked at her then, not like a hunter, like a man who had found a question he did not expect to want. What he did not know was that Elara had left more than a job. She had left a promise that had been taken from her mouth and twisted until it broke. She had left a room where the window was open, but the air would not come in. He eased his horse down the slope, hoof by hoof, deliberate. The sound small, but not hidden. When he reached the basin, he stopped 3 paces from her. Up close, his presence filled the space carefully. He did not crowd her. He kept his hands where a person could see them. The desert had taught him not to startle a living thing that was trying to stand its ground. "Why me?" she asked. "Why send you and not some eager boy who wants to prove his aim?" "Because I do not miss," he said, "and because I ask before I shoot." She felt a heat at the back of her eyes. Strange, it was not fear. It was the way a person's body remembers kindness and does not know where to put it. The mare nickered once. Cotton leaves fluttered. A strip of cloud crossed the sun. Elara spoke first. "If you bring me back, I will not be safe. If I do not bring you back," he said, "I may not be safe. Then maybe we ride one day together and see which danger has the better manners." He let out a breath, a soft thing, almost like relief finding its way to the surface. "One day," he said, "a hawk cried, far, thin as a thread." He turned in the saddle. He looked north. She followed his gaze. At the horizon, a smudge of smoke lifted from behind a line of low bluffs. He saw it too. Someone had made fire where fire should not be. "There is a way through those bluffs," she said. "A cut the maps forgot." "Show me," he said. And for the first time in 3 days, she felt something inside her loosen. Not trust, not yet, but the first plank of a bridge set across a flooded place. They rode together into the white riverbed and left the cold ash behind. Their shadows stretched long. The wind shifted like a thought that chooses a new word. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close. The road ahead is not gentle, but it will be true. Like, share, or comment if you have felt that same quiet longing beneath the western sky. Elara touched the mare's neck and glanced at him once more. Then she said, in a voice steady and low, that the way through the bluffs began with a turn most riders never saw. Would you like me to lead you there now? The wind rose with the morning. Thin light sifted through cloud and smoke. They rode in silence, the sound of hooves muffled by sand. Elara led. Cassian followed. A space of 3 paces between them, not too close, not far enough to lose her shadow. The land changed slowly. The riverbed narrowed to a vein of white stone. Walls of bluff rock leaned in, red and gold, carved by forgotten water. The world felt smaller here, closer to something that remembered pain. Elara's voice came without turning. This cut was once a river. My mother said it still carries what water remembers. Cassian's eyes moved along the stone. He saw the smooth curves, the hollows that had once held floods. She was right, he said. His voice fit the canyon like it had been there before her. The mare's breath steamed in the cool shade. Elara loosened the reins. She didn't know why she had spoken of her mother. That ghost belonged to quieter nights. But his calm pulled words from her like wind pulling smoke from coals. She died on the far side of the Sierra, Elara said softly. Winter took her, but she used to hum when she rode. Said the land listens if you give it a song. Cassian nodded. I used to think that too. He did not say whose song he'd once listened for. He did not say the name he still carried like a scar inside a coat pocket. For a while, there was only the sound of their horses breathing. The canyon walls glowed warm in the rising sun. Dust shimmered where it caught the light. At a bend, the path tightened. Elara pulled her mare close to the wall and looked up. High above, on the rim, something flickered. A flash of movement against the pale sky. She froze. Cassian saw it too. His hand went to the rifle slung behind his leg. He didn't draw it, just waited, still as the stone around him. Another flash. Metal. Then the faint shape of a man. They found us, she whispered. Not yet, Cassian said. But his tone carried weight, the kind that comes from knowing what follows when men hunt for pay. He studied the rim. 2 riders, maybe 3, moving slow, keeping high, watching. He turned his horse toward the shadow side of the canyon. Keep to the wall, he said. They can't shoot what the sun doesn't touch. She obeyed, though her heart beat faster than the mare's stride. The air felt thinner now, and she could smell metal, the way blood smells when it dries on a blade. Cassian's mind worked through the land's memory. Every cut, every rise, every echo. He had hunted in places like this before. He had been the shadow on the rim once, looking down at those who ran. He looked at her now, the set of her shoulders, the way her hand trembled once, then steadied. She was not built for running. She was built for surviving. They followed the wall until the canyon turned again. There, a narrow opening split the rock, barely wide enough for one horse. Elara looked back. They'll corner us if we stay." Cassian dismounted. He pressed a hand to the stone. A faint draught slipped through. "There's a way," he said. "Old miners carved through these bluffs years ago. If the passage still stands, it'll open near the mesas." He met her eyes. "You trust me?" She hesitated. Then, "I trust what the desert trusts, whatever stands its ground." That answer made something inside him ease, something that had been tight for years. He nodded once. "Then stay close." They entered the crack in the stone. Dark swallowed them whole. Only the sound of hooves echoing like a heartbeat inside the earth. The tunnel twisted. Cold air brushed her face. Drips fell from unseen heights. Her mare snorted, uneasy. Cassian raised his lantern, a small trembling flame. Its light touched the walls, glinting on old pick marks and rusted nails. He saw faint writing scratched into the rock. "Leave no man behind." He didn't tell her what it said. Some words were meant to stay ghosts. After a while the passage widened. They came to a cavern where a shaft of light poured through a break above. Dust floated in gold swirls. In the center stood an abandoned cart, half broken, filled with ore stone turned dull by time. Elara ran her fingers over the rough edge. How many men bled here for what they'd never hold? "Too many," he said. His voice softened. "Same number that chase what they'll never understand." She turned toward him. Lantern light flickered on his face, on the small scar above his cheek, on the quiet steadiness in his eyes. He looked at her as though she were part of the land he'd been trying to read his whole life. Her chest ached. She didn't want to feel it, that slow warmth spreading where fear had lived. But it came anyway, quiet and persistent as dawn over the plains. "Why do you still hunt for men like Vale?" she asked. He looked at her, long and honest. "Because once I was him. And I'm still trying to make it right." Silence. Then far behind them, the echo of hooves, distant but coming. Cassian turned toward the tunnel mouth. "Move," he said. They found the cut. They ran for the far end, where light poured through cracks in the stone. The sound behind them grew. More hooves, faster, harder. A shout. A shot. The bullet sparked on the wall and died. Elara's mare surged forward, squeezed through a narrow slit of light, and burst into open sky. Cassian followed, rifle drawn now. They spilled out onto the high plateau, the desert wide and gold before them. Wind tore across the flats. Far below, the canyon mouth roared with pursuit. Elara looked back once. Her hair whipped in the wind, eyes fierce. Cassian caught her gaze. "Ride north," he said. "There's a ridge that cuts to the valley. We can lose them there." "And if we don't?" she asked. He chambered around, the sound sharp as flint. "Then they'll wish they'd never found us." The sun blazed over the horizon, hard and white. Dust lifted in spirals around their horses as they broke into the open. The chase began again, but this time it was no longer clear who was being hunted. The wind carried their breath, their fear, their strange new tether, and somewhere inside her, Elara realized, running beside him, felt less like flight and more like choosing where to stand. If this story has stirred something quiet and wild within you, stay near the firelight. The trail ahead burns brighter still. Like share or comment if your heart knows that kind of desert storm. Elara turned toward him as they reached the ridge. "Cassian," she said, her voice low beneath the wind, "there's something you need to know about the man who sent you after me." The words caught between them like a breath that could change the sky. Cassian slowed his horse. The ridge beneath them trembled with heat, and the wind pulled at their coats. He turned his head slightly, voice even. "What is it you think I need to know?" Elara's fingers tightened on the reins. Her mare shifted, restless. "Archer Vale isn't just a man with money and rage. He's the law in Silverton. The sheriff does what he says. The town sleeps under his boot." Cassian's jaw worked once, slow, as if grinding stone. "I've seen his kind before." "No," she said, eyes burning in the light. "Not like him. He owns the jail, the bank, the preachers, and the graveyard. He doesn't hire hunters to bring people back. He hires them to bury what they know." A silence hung heavy between them, thicker than dust. Cassian looked toward the horizon, where the desert ran endless and unbroken. "Then why hire me?" Her voice cracked. "Because he didn't think you'd ask questions." The wind carried her words away, scattering them like ashes. Cassian's grip on the saddle horn tightened. "Tell me what you know," he said. "All of it." Elara's throat worked, but the words came slow. "There's a ledger, hidden at the freight office near the tracks. Vale's name is all over it. Shipments, false debts, people who disappeared. I found it when I was working for him. I thought if I brought it to the marshal, I could walk free." Her eyes drifted to the horizon, but the marshal was already bought, and that same night, Vale came to my door. Said I'd stolen what was his. Said I'd pay. Cassian watched her. The story was the kind men told in bars, until they happened to you. He knew what it meant to be trapped in another man's lie. He nodded once. "You ran." "I ran," she whispered. "But the desert doesn't hide anyone forever." Cassian turned in the saddle, scanning the ridge. Down below, 3 riders followed their trail. The distance between them was shrinking. He counted their rhythm, their spread. Experienced hands. No fear of open ground. "They're still coming," he said. Elara swallowed hard. "They won't stop." "No," Cassian murmured. "They won't." He pulled his horse beside hers. "Listen to me. When we reach that valley, you'll see an old windmill and a shack half buried in sand. Go there. Wait for me." She stared at him. "You're not coming?" "I'll draw them off." "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "You can't fight 3 men alone." He looked at her, eyes steady as the desert sky. "I've fought worse. And the difference between living and dying isn't always the bullet. Sometimes it's the reason you stay in the fight." Her lips parted, a protest caught behind them. She wanted to tell him not to play savior, that she didn't need saving. But the way he said it, calm, certain, made her chest ache. He nudged his horse closer. "Elara." Her name left his mouth like a promise. "You've been running from everything but yourself. Let this be the first time you ride toward something." For a heartbeat, her breath tangled with his. Then she looked away, the ridge breaking into open sand below. "All right," she whispered, But don't make me wait too long. Cassian's smile was faint, ghost-like. I never do. They rode hard across the ridge until the land split into two directions, one path curling north toward the windmill, the other dropping into a ravine filled with stone and echo. Cassian turned down the ravine without looking back. Elara reined her mare north, heart pounding like hooves in her ribs. The riders crested the rise behind them, dark shapes against the sun. Gunfire cracked through the wind. Elara ducked low, the bullet whistling past. Dust rose in spirals behind her. Down in the ravine, Cassian wheeled his horse and took cover behind a fallen boulder. He drew his rifle, exhaled slow, and fired once. The first rider toppled sideways, the second veered, cursing. The third took cover among the rocks above. Cassian waited, always waiting, like the desert itself. A voice echoed down the ravine. "Cass Holt! You got no business in this, boy. Hand her over, and maybe you keep your skin." Cassian's voice came back low, flat as wind through bone. "I don't take orders from ghosts." He fired again. The echo rolled down the canyon walls like thunder that had lost its patience. From the ridge above, Elara could see the flashes, small sparks of violence in the stone. Her hands shook, but she couldn't ride on. Not yet. She turned the mare back, her heart defying reason. The sound of a scream tore the air, then silence. She pressed her heels in and rode toward it. By the time she reached the ravine, two bodies lay still among the rocks. Cassian was crouched behind his horse, bleeding from the arm. The last gunman was gone, vanished into the far cut of the canyon. Elara slid from her saddle, ran to him. "You're hit." He looked up at her, pale under the dust. "It's nothing." She tore a strip from her sleeve and pressed it against the wound. Her hands were shaking, but her voice stayed soft. "You're a terrible liar." He huffed a breath, half laugh, half pain. "Only when it matters." For a moment, the desert disappeared. It was just them. Her hands on his arm, his breath close enough to warm the space between. The air hummed with something that wasn't fear anymore. When she looked up, their eyes met. And for the first time, she didn't see the hunter. She saw the man. Cassian's voice was rough, quiet. "You shouldn't have come back." "Then stop giving me reasons to," she whispered. He looked away, jaw tightening, not in anger, but because the truth cut deeper than the wound. He knew what he'd started couldn't be stopped. Not the hunt. Not her. The wind shifted again. Far in the distance, another echo. Riders, maybe more. Cassian's gaze turned north. "They'll bring others," he said. "We have to move." Elara nodded, helping him to his feet. He staggered once, then steadied. Blood marked the dust at his boots. They mounted. The desert stretched ahead, vast and waiting. As they rode toward the fading sun, Elara glanced at him. "You said once you don't miss," she said softly. "Does that mean me too?" He didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth curved, just enough to make the silence feel like promise. If this story has left a mark on your heart, stay close. The fire ahead still burns for those who dare to follow. Like, share, or comment if your soul knows the sound of dust, danger, and desire beneath the western sky. The horizon deepened into crimson, and Cassian turned his head toward her. "Elara," he said quietly, "before we reach the valley, There's something I never told you about the man I used to be. The evening light settled into copper. Long shadows crawled across the open plain, and the heat fell away like a worn-out prayer. Elara rode close now, not because she didn't trust the trail, but because something in his voice had changed. Cassian's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. He didn't speak at first. Then, with a breath that seemed to scrape against old memory, he said, "Before I ever carried a bounty, I carried something worse. A badge." Elara looked at him, startled. "You were a lawman?" He nodded once. "Deputy in a border town called Red Hollow. Thought I could keep the line straight. Thought the badge meant something." His tone was dry, brittle as desert bone. "What happened?" she asked softly. Cassian's fingers traced the scar on his arm. "A man named Vale happened. Years ago. Before Silverton. He wasn't rich then. Just mean with a smile. He ran contraband through the mining camps. I tried to stop him. He paid the sheriff instead." He paused. "There was a woman, too. Her name was May. She believed in me when I didn't deserve it. And Vale used her to get to me. One night, fire took the jail. I was the only one who walked out. The wind held still. Even the horses seemed to listen." Elara's voice was a whisper. "She didn't make it?" Cassian shook his head. "She burned because I trusted the wrong man. So when Vale came back into the light, rich, powerful, untouchable, I swore I'd never miss another chance to make him answer." He looked at her then, eyes shadowed by dusk. "And then they handed me your name." Elara's heart clenched. "So, I'm just another chance?" "No," he said quietly. "You're the one that made me stop believing the trail always leads to blood." They rode in silence a while longer, the kind that said more than words could. The desert began to change again, dunes giving way to dry grass, patches of sage glowing silver in the low sun. Ahead, the windmill came into view, a thin black cross against the reddening sky. Next to it, the shack, half sunk, leaning, forgotten. Elara slowed her horse. "That's it!" Cassian scanned the horizon before they approached. No riders, no dust trails. But the air carried a scent. Smoke, faint and wrong. He swung down from his saddle, wincing as the wound in his arm pulled. "Stay here," he said. Elara dismounted anyway, revolver in hand. "I told you before, I don't wait when someone I trust walks into trouble." He almost smiled. "You trust easy for someone who's been hunted." She met his gaze. "Only when the hunter bleeds for me." He didn't argue. He just nodded once, the kind of agreement that felt heavier than speech. They moved toward the shack, quiet, careful. Boards creaked under their boots. The windmill moaned in the fading wind. Inside, the air was stale with dust and old ash. A broken chair, a kettle overturned, and near the far wall, prints in the sand. Fresh. Cassian crouched. 2 men, maybe 3, left not long ago. Elara's pulse quickened. "Vale's men? Or worse," Cassian murmured. "Men who think they can finish what he started." He searched the room, found a torn saddlebag in the corner. Inside, papers, old telegram slips, and a scrap of ledger torn clean through. Names, dates, numbers that matched the story she'd told. Elara knelt beside him, breath catching. "That's it. Part of the ledger. Vale's handwriting. Cassian held it to the light leaking through the cracks. Then we've got proof. Her eyes softened. We? He met her look. Seems I've already picked my side. Before she could answer, a gunshot split the air outside. The window shattered, spraying dust and glass. Cassian pulled her down, covering her with his body as another bullet ripped through the wall. "Back!" he barked. They circled ahead. Elara's heart hammered. Cassian raised his rifle through the crack between boards and fired once. A scream followed, then silence, but more hooves thundered closer. "They found us," Elara whispered. Cassian's voice stayed calm. "Then we make them regret it." He pushed the table to the window, bracing it. "Elara, back room. There's a cellar door under the cot. You'll find a passage leading out the north side. I'm not leaving you. You're not running. You're surviving." He pressed the ledger scrap into her hand. "This is what he's killing for. You keep it safe." Her fingers clenched around the paper. "Cassian, go!" Another shot splintered the frame above his head. He fired back, deliberate, slow. Outside, a man fell from his horse. Two more circled wide. Elara hesitated one breath too long. Cassian turned to her, eyes fierce. "I said go, Elara." She swallowed hard and backed toward the inner door. Her boots hit the cellar hatch. She lifted it, the hinges groaning like an old secret. Before she slipped down, she looked once more at him, the man who had been sent to hunt her, and now stood between her and the dark. His face was calm, lit by firelight from the setting sun. "Cassian?" He met her gaze. "Ride north when it's clear. Don't look back." A final shot cracked. He ducked, returned fire, and she dropped into the cellar, landing hard among barrels and dust. The air was cold, damp, a tunnel running under the shack. She pressed the paper to her chest, heart pounding. Above, the fight raged. Gunfire, shouts, then silence again. She waited. A minute, two, maybe more. Then came a sound she didn't expect. Boots, slow, heavy, deliberate. Not his. The hatch creaked open. A shape blocked the light. Tall, wide-shouldered, wearing a black coat she knew too well. The voice that followed slid through the dark like a knife through silk. "Well now," Archer Vale drawled, "you've been a hard one to find, Miss Wynn. If this story has struck a chord in your soul, stay close. The night still has fire left to burn. Like, share, or comment if you've ever felt the storm before the dawn beneath the western sky." Elara froze, breath shallow. And as the lantern above cast his shadow down into the cellar, she whispered only one name, not Vale's, but Cassian's. The lantern's glow slid down the narrow steps, cutting through dust like a slow, cruel dawn. Elara pressed her back to the dirt wall, clutching the torn ledger scrap against her chest. Archer Vale descended one step at a time, boots polished, coat black as the inside of a coffin. His smile was made of glass, sharp and empty. "Well," he said softly, "the desert keeps giving me miracles. Thought I'd have to dig you up myself." Elara didn't move, didn't breathe. Her revolver lay near her boot, half buried in straw. If she reached now, he'd see the motion. Vale tilted the lantern higher. Its light licked over her face. "There you are." He savoured the words. Men like him always did. "I hired Holt to find you," he said, "and I'll be damned. He actually did." His eyes swept the cellar. "Where is he now?" Elara's voice was steady, but her pulse roared. "Gone." Vale's grin widened. "Gone where?" "To hell," she said. He laughed, a low, dry sound. "Oh, sweetheart, he's not half as hard to kill as he pretends." Vale reached for the revolver at his side. "Now, why don't you hand me what you took, and we'll both ride out of this hole alive?" Elara's fingers tightened around the paper. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Alive doesn't mean free." Something in his smile cracked. "Still full of pretty speeches," he said. "You'll have plenty of time to make them from a cell." He raised the gun. The metallic click echoed like thunder in a tomb, and then a sound from above. The heavy creak of boots, a shadow cutting the light at the top of the stairs. Vale turned, sharp. "Who's there?" The rifle fired before he finished. The shot ripped through the air, struck the lantern and shattered it in his hand. Flame burst out, oil spilling, fire flaring wild. Vale cursed, staggering back. Elara dove, grabbing her revolver from the straw. Smoke filled the cellar, thick and fast. Through the haze, Cassian's voice came from above, rough and certain. "Elara, get out!" She fired once, the bullet catching Vale's shoulder. He roared and fell against the wall. Flame crawled up the wood, racing toward the beams overhead. Cassian appeared at the hatch, blood on his sleeve, eyes lit by the fire's glow. "Come on!" Elara scrambled toward him, coughing through smoke. He reached down, caught her wrist, and hauled her up. The heat licked her boots as they stumbled into the open air. Behind them, the shack erupted into flame, a collapsing orange beast devouring itself. The sky was bruised with dusk. The wind carried sparks like dying stars. Cassian pulled her toward the horses. "Vale?" he asked. She shook her head, still coughing. "Hit him! Don't know if he's dead." He looked back once, the door bursting open in a storm of fire and smoke. A figure stumbled out, burning sleeve flailing. Archer Vale fell to his knees, his voice lost in the roar. Then he was gone beneath the weight of flame. Cassian watched until the roof caved. Then he turned to her. "You hurt?" Elara wiped ash from her face, shaking. "No." Then, quieter. "You shouldn't have come back." He gave a low breath, the ghost of a smile. "Seems to be a habit of ours." The firelight flickered over his face. Sweat, blood, and something gentler underneath. The storm of the moment slowed around them. Elara looked at him, at the man who had once hunted her, who now stood between her and every kind of darkness. Her voice came small but certain. "You saved me." Cassian's eyes softened. "No," he said. "You just weren't ready to let the desert have you." For a while, neither spoke. Only the sound of fire and the distant cry of night birds. When she finally did, her tone had changed, low and steady. "Vile might be gone, but that ledger proves everything. The town deserves to know." Cassian nodded slowly. "They'll come for it. You know that." "I don't care," she said. "I won't run any more." He studied her, the set of her jaw, the burn of resolve in her eyes. "Then I'll stand with you." "You don't owe me that," she said. I know, he replied. That's why it matters. The fire behind them dimmed to embers, and a cold wind pushed through the valley. Cassian tied the bandage tighter around his arm, wincing. Elara moved closer, catching his hand. "Let me," she murmured. He hesitated, then let her. She worked in silence, fingers brushing his skin, careful, gentle, sure. When she finished, she didn't move her hand away. Cassian looked at her, the flicker of flame caught in his eyes. "This isn't the end, Elara." "I know," she said, "but maybe it's the first part that isn't just running." He gave a slow nod. "Then we ride at dawn." "Where?" "Silverton," he said. "If we're bringing the truth, we bring it to the man who built his kingdom on lies." Elara swallowed, the thought heavy. "You mean to face them?" He met her gaze. "I mean to finish what I started. If this story has found its way under your skin, stay by the fire. The road ahead burns brighter for those who keep their courage. Like, share, or comment if your heart knows the sound of justice rising beneath the western sky." Cassian turned toward the horizon, where the night was deepening to indigo. Behind them, the shack still burned. And when Elara whispered, "Then let's ride to Silverton," he said nothing, only reached for her hand and didn't let go. By dawn, the sky had turned the color of worn steel. The fire behind them had burned itself to silence, leaving only smoke and the smell of ash. Cassian and Elara rode east toward Silverton, toward the place that had started it all. Neither spoke much. Words seemed fragile beside the hum of hooves and the long breath of the wind. Every few miles, Elara would glance at Cassian's arm. The bandage darkened, but his posture never faltered. The land grew harsher as they rode. Hills rose from the plain, their faces scarred by old mines. A dry riverbed split the ground like a wound, and at its far end the town waited, a patch of roofs and smoke framed by the dying light. Silverton, a town built on secrets and held together by fear. Elara slowed her mare. She looked at the place that had hunted her, that still wore Vale's shadow across its streets. "He built his kingdom there," she whispered. Cassian nodded. "And we'll end it there." They dismounted near a ridge overlooking the outskirts. Below, the main street was already stirring. Wagons rolling, voices calling, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoing off the boards. Life carried on, because it didn't yet know what waited. Cassian crouched, scanning the town. "The marshal's office is at the far end, across from the saloon. That's where you'll hand over the ledger." Elara frowned. "You're coming with me?" He hesitated. "No, you walk in alone. They'll be less likely to shoot first." "And you?" He checked the rifle strapped to his saddle. "I'll be watching." She caught his hand before he turned away. "Cassian." He looked at her, the sun catching the dust in his hair. Her words trembled, but her eyes did not. "If something happens, you ride. Don't play hero again." A faint smile crossed his lips. "I don't know how to be anything else." She almost smiled back, but the ache in her chest stopped her. Then she nodded. "Fine. But if you die for me, I'll kill you myself." He gave a quiet laugh, low, rough, human. "Deal." Silverton met her with silence. People stopped when they saw her walk down the main street. Eyes followed. Whispers rose. No one spoke her name aloud, but everyone knew it. She kept her shoulders straight, the paper folded tight in her hand. At the end of the street, the marshal's office loomed, a square building of sun-bleached wood and bad memories. The door creaked when she pushed it open. Marshal Green looked up from his desk. He was a big man, greying beard, eyes cold. "Well, I'll be damned," he said slowly. "Elara Wynn." "Marshal," she said, "we need to talk." He leaned back. "You've got nerve walking in here." She dropped the folded paper on his desk. "Maybe this will make up for it." He unfolded the scrap, eyes narrowing. The handwriting, veils. The columns of figures, the coded initials, the weight of proof. His jaw tightened. "Where'd you get this?" "I worked for him," she said. "I saw what he did, how he bought the law, how he used men like you." Something flickered behind his eyes. Then he folded the paper, slow and careful. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. "Vale's dead. His money's still here. His friends still run this town." Elara's breath caught. "So you'll just bury it?" He shrugged. "Some things are better left in the ground." Behind him, the door opened. Bootsteps. 2 men entered. Deputies, rifles ready. Elara's pulse spiked. "You're making a mistake, Marshal." "No," he said. "You did when you came back." The room seemed to shrink. Outside, wind scraped dust against the windows. And then another sound, the click of a hammer being drawn back. From the doorway, a familiar voice spoke. "I'd think twice about that, Marshal." Cassian Holt stepped into the light. His coat was dusted grey, eyes sharp, rifle steady. "Seems to me the lady brought you a chance to make things right," he said. "Don't waste it." Green's face twisted. "You don't scare me, Holt." Cassian took a step closer. "You should." The deputies raised their rifles. Elara dove sideways as Cassian fired. One shot, clean and sure. The first deputy fell. The second hesitated, then dropped his gun and ran. The marshal reached for his pistol, but Cassian's voice stopped him. "Don't," he said. "You're not fast enough." For a long moment, the room held still. Only the wind moved, moaning through the cracks. Then Green's shoulders sagged. He looked at Elara, not as prey now, but as truth he couldn't hide from any more. "What are you going to do?" he asked quietly. Elara's voice was soft, steady. "What Vale took, he took in this town's name. I'm giving it back to the people." Cassian nodded once. "She's done running, and I'm done watching men like you keep the dirt clean for devils." Green swallowed hard. Then, with a trembling hand, he set the paper on the desk. "Take it. But if you walk out that door, you'll have every friend Vale ever made on your heels." Cassian smiled. Tired, dangerous. "Then I reckon they'd better start saddling up." They left the office as the first drops of rain began to fall. Silverton hadn't seen rain in months. Now it came like judgment. Slow, heavy, cleansing. People gathered under the awnings, watching the two of them walk through the street, the hunter and the hunted, side by side. Elara held her chin high. Cassian walked a half-step behind, rifle resting across his shoulder, eyes never leaving the roofs above. At the far end of the street, thunder rolled. The sky cracked open in silver light. "Where to now?" she asked. Cassian looked up, rain streaking down his jaw. "Anywhere the truth still has room to breathe." She smiled faintly. "That might be farther than this desert runs." "Then we ride until we find it." If this story has kindled something fierce and tender in you, stay close. The storm's only just begun. Like, share, or comment if your heart knows the scent of rain and redemption beneath the western sky. Lightning split the horizon, painting them in silver fire. And as they mounted up, Cassian turned to her and said, "Before we ride, there's something you need to see. Something I buried long before I found you." The rain fell harder now, turning the dust to dark earth and painting the horizon with streaks of firelight and storm. Cassian rode in silence, his hat pulled low, water dripping from the brim. Beside him, Elara rode close enough that their horses' shoulders brushed now and then. They didn't speak. The kind of silence that lived between them wasn't empty. It was heavy with all that had been said and all that hadn't. When they left Silverton behind, the land widened again. Rolling plains, red rock, the faint scent of sage bruised under hooves. The sky above them broke open, clouds swirling like smoke from the world's first fire. Cassian slowed his horse and nodded toward a small rise ahead. "There," he said. Elara looked where he pointed, a lonely hill marked by a single wooden cross, half fallen, half forgotten. They dismounted. Cassian stood still for a long time, rain dripping from his coat, the wind pulling at his sleeves. Elara waited, sensing the weight of what this place meant. "She's here," he said finally, his voice barely more than the rain. "May?" she asked softly. He nodded once. "Buried her myself. Used my hands. Didn't trust the ground to do it gentle." He crouched beside the grave, brushing wet grass from the name carved into the wood. May Holt. Elara's throat tightened. "She was your wife." He shook his head slowly. "No, we never had time for vows. She was the part of me that believed in light before I learned how long nights can be." Elara stepped closer. "I'm sorry." Cassian gave a slow, tired breath. "Don't be. I failed her, not the other way around." His voice cracked then, not loud, but the kind of break that comes from carrying too many ghosts. "When Vale burned Red Hollow, I thought killing him would bring her peace. But peace isn't a thing you win. It's something you stop running from." He looked up at her. "You helped me remember that." Rain slid down her face. She didn't hide the tears that mixed with it. "You think she'd forgive you?" Cassian's gaze lingered on the wooden cross. "Maybe, if she saw the woman standing next to me." Elara swallowed hard. She wanted to reach for him, but didn't. There was a sacredness to grief, even shared. The wind rose, and thunder rolled low across the plains. Cassian pulled something from his coat pocket, a small silver locket, tarnished and dented. He opened it once, looked inside, then set it on the grave. "Time to stop talking to ghosts," he said quietly. Elara's voice was gentle. "Sometimes Ghosts are the only ones who listen. He met her eyes, tired, steady, alive. Not anymore. They stood together until the rain softened to mist. When they turned to leave, Cassian paused. "Elara, there's something I didn't tell you." She looked at him, waiting. Vale wasn't working alone. That ledger, it's just one part. There's another name on it, someone bigger. The man who bought his silence. "Who?" she asked. He hesitated, jaw tightening. "Judge Corbin, the circuit judge for this whole territory." Her breath caught. That means every conviction, every hanging, every deed Vale touched. It all leads to him." Elara stared into the distance, where Silverton's lights shimmered faintly through the haze. "Then we didn't end it. We just cut off one head." Cassian nodded. "And now the rest will come looking." She turned toward him, the stormlight reflected in her eyes. "So, what do we do?" He looked down at his hands, rough, scarred, stained. "Do what we always do, ride toward the danger, not away from it." Elara smiled through the ache in her chest. "Then I guess I'll need a new horse." He laughed softly, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. "I guess you will." They mounted again. The world around them glowed silver in the last light of the storm. As they started north, Elara reached into her coat and touched the folded ledger. Rain had blurred the ink, but not the truth. Cassian glanced at her. "You could still walk away, you know. Find some quiet town. Start over." She shook her head. "I already started over. The day I stopped running." He looked at her, something deep and unspoken passing between them, something that belonged to neither words nor fear. The storm broke open once more, lightning burning white across the horizon. Their shadows stretched long against the ground as they rode. If this story has left your heart riding beside theirs, stay close. The wind hasn't spoken its last truth. Like, share, or comment if your soul knows that love and redemption always ride the same trail beneath the western sky. Elara turned toward him as thunder echoed far away. "Cassian," she said, her voice quiet but sure, "if we're going after a judge, we'll need more than truth. We'll need allies." The storm broke behind them, leaving the world washed in the pale gold of dawn. The ground steamed, rain pooling in shallow tracks that mirrored the sky. Cassian and Elara rode north along a narrow trail that wound between low mesas and sage. They hadn't spoken since the grave. The air between them hummed with something too deep for words. Grief, maybe, or the strange calm that comes after surviving fire. When the sun cleared the horizon, Cassian finally said, "There's someone in Dead Hollow we can trust." Elara turned to him. "A friend?" He gave a dry half-smile. "Once. Before the world started keeping score." They reached Dead Hollow by midday. A mining town gone to ruin, its main street half swallowed by sand. Old signs creaked in the wind. A church steeple leaned like a drunk who'd lost his faith. Cassian stopped in front of a half-collapsed barn. "She still runs her saloon out of what's left," he said. Elara arched a brow. "She?" He nodded. "Name's Ruth Calder. Smart as sin, mean as whiskey. She used to ride with the rangers before she found out justice didn't pay. He dismounted, winced as his arm throbbed beneath the bandage, and led the horse forward. Elara followed, boots sinking into wet sand. Inside, the air smelled of tobacco and rust. A woman stood behind the counter, polishing a revolver with a rag that had seen better days. Her hair was streaked silver, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Well, I'll be damned," she said. "Cass Holt, crawling out of the grave to find me." Cassian smiled faintly. "Didn't think the desert could keep me." Ruth holstered the gun and stepped around the counter. "You look worse than the last time I saw you." He shrugged. "Still breathing?" She eyed Elara. "And who's this?" Elara lifted her chin. "Elara Wynn." Recognition flickered in Ruth's eyes. "The one Vale wanted dead." Elara's voice was calm, steady. "He got his wish. I'm just what's left." Ruth studied her a moment, then nodded with the kind of respect that comes from seeing someone refuse to break. "So," she said, turning back to Cassian, "what trouble drags you to my door this time?" Cassian laid the damp ledger scrap on the table. "The kind that reaches farther than one town." Ruth read it in silence, her brow furrowing. "Judge Corbin," she muttered. "That snake still breathing? I thought the rangers took him off the bench." "They did," Cassian said. "He built his own." Ruth gave a low whistle. "You're not thinking of going after him?" Elara spoke before Cassian could answer. "We don't have a choice," Ruth smirked. "You sure learned his stubbornness quick." Elara met her gaze evenly. "He's not the only one who's tired of running." The older woman's eyes softened. "Good. You'll need that spine." She walked to the bar, pulled out a bottle of rye, and poured 3 glasses. "To ghosts that won't stay buried," she said, raising hers. They drank. The whiskey burned like truth. When she set the glass down, Ruth said, "Corbin's been laying low near Red Mesa. He's got a compound there. Armed men, watchers, the works. If you're going, you'll need more than heart." Cassian nodded. "That's why I came." Ruth gave a slow smile. "Thought so. I still owe you for Tumble Creek." He chuckled. "You already paid that debt." "Maybe," she said, "but I like to balance my books." She glanced toward the back room. "I've got 2 rifles, a crate of ammo, and a horse that bites worse than I do. You can take them, if you promise to come back alive." Cassian's answer was quiet. "Can't promise that, Ruth." She sighed. "Didn't think so." Elara stepped forward. "Thank you." Ruth's eyes lingered on her. "Don't thank me yet." "You'll wish you never knew him before this is done." "I already do," Elara said softly, "and I'm still here." Ruth's mouth curved. "Then maybe you're the only kind of woman who could keep up with him." They packed before the sun reached its height. Cassian checked the rifles, loaded fresh rounds, then tied the ledger inside his saddlebag. Ruth followed them to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Corbin's men run patrols through the North Pass at dusk," she warned. "You'll need to cross before then." Cassian tipped his hat. "Appreciate it." Ruth reached out, caught his sleeve. "You ever find peace, Cass?" she said. "Hold it tight. It's a rare thing out here." He nodded. "Maybe I already did." Her gaze slid to Elara. "I hope you're right." They rode out as the light began to turn amber. The road ahead climbed toward Red Mesa, toward the final reckoning. The wind was warm now, carrying the smell of wet earth and promise. Elara rode in silence, watching the way his hand rested on the rifle stock. "Ruth was right," she said finally. "You do look worse than before." Cassian gave a dry laugh. "You always this kind?" "Only when I'm scared," she said. He looked at her then, long and steady. "Good. Means you're still alive." For the first time, she smiled. Not the kind born of relief, but of trust. Fragile, real, and dangerous all at once. If this story has lit a fire beneath your heart, stay close. The storm is gathering on the horizon. Like, share, or comment if your soul has ever ridden toward danger with love as your only compass. As the last light faded behind them, Cassian turned his head toward the north ridge and said, "Before night falls, there's something Ruth didn't tell you about Red Mesa, something I need you to be ready for." The world had turned to copper and shadow by the time they reached the ridge. Wind whispered through the canyons below, carrying the smell of rain and gun oil. Red Mesa rose ahead, a jagged plateau streaked with rust-colored stone, crowned by a lonely house that watched the desert like an executioner. Cassian reined in his horse. "That's it," he said quietly. "Corbin's stronghold." Elara's eyes narrowed. "You've been here before?" He nodded once. "Years ago, when I still wore the badge. Thought it was a courthouse then. Didn't know it was where justice came to die." Below, torches flickered around the compound. Men on patrol, rifles slung across their backs. The air pulsed with tension, thick and metallic. Cassian looked toward the east side of the ridge. "There's an old mining chute behind those rocks. Leads straight into the back of the house." Elara studied the slope. "You sure it's still open?" He gave a thin smile. "Only one way to find out." They dismounted, tying the horses in the shadow of a boulder. Cassian checked his rifle, then handed her a revolver. "Stay behind me," he said. "I wasn't planning to lead," she answered, loading the chamber with calm hands. For a moment he looked at her, hair damp with sweat, eyes steady under the flicker of torchlight. "You've changed," he said softly. "So have you," she replied. They moved down the ridge, silent as dust. The chute gaped open behind a cluster of rocks, half hidden by brush. Cassian dropped first, sliding into the darkness. Elara followed, the world closing around them, narrow stone walls, the echo of their breaths. It smelled of iron and old secrets. A faint light glimmered ahead, marking the exit. Cassian stopped before stepping out. He held up a hand. "Voices," he whispered. They listened. 2 men, guards, arguing about wages and whiskey. Cassian motioned for Elara to wait, then crept forward. A flash of movement, a muffled thud, then silence. He reappeared, wiping dust from his hands. "Clear," he said. They slipped out into a low corridor built from stone and timber. Old mining lanterns lined the walls. The floor sloped upward toward a door at the end. Cassian's voice was barely a breath. "Corbin's office is through there." Elara's pulse thudded in her ears. "You ready for this?" He gave a small, grim smile. "Been ready since the day he signed my death warrant." They pushed the door open. The room beyond was large, lined with law books and whiskey bottles. At the center sat Judge Corbin, white-haired, heavy-set, a man whose face had been carved into a permanent sneer. He didn't look surprised. "Well," he said, setting down his glass, Cassian Holt. I was wondering when you'd crawl back out of the dust. Cassian stepped forward, rifle steady. You remember the woman veil burned in Red Hollow? Corbin leaned back in his chair. I remember a fire. Cassian's jaw clenched. You ordered it. The old man's smile didn't fade. Justice is never clean, son. Some things burn so the rest can stand. Elara's voice cut through the room like a blade. And how many had to burn for your justice to shine, Judge? Corbin's gaze flicked to her. So you're the girl, the thief, the witness who ran. I ran, she said, so I could come back. Cassian lowered the rifle's barrel toward the desk. The ledger's enough to hang you 10 times over. Corbin chuckled, slow and bitter. You think paper means anything in this territory? I am the law here. Not any more, Cassian said. Before the judge could answer, the door burst open. 2 armed men rushed in, guns drawn. Cassian dove sideways, firing once. One fell. The other's bullet grazed his shoulder. Elara grabbed the second revolver from Cassian's belt and fired, clean, controlled. The last man dropped, his gun clattering to the floor. Corbin rose, fury twisting his face. You'll hang for this! Cassian walked toward him slowly, rifle lowered, but eyes burning. No! I already did, the day you killed everything I was. Corbin reached for a hidden pistol in his desk, but Elara was faster. She shot once. The bullet shattered the glass decanter beside his hand, shards flying like rain. He froze. Her voice was calm. The next one doesn't miss. Cassian pulled the ledger scrap from his coat and dropped it on the desk. Sign it, he said. Confess to every name on that page. Corbin stared at him, disbelief turning to hatred. You wouldn't shoot an unarmed man. Cassian's tone was quiet, measured. Try me. The judge hesitated, then picked up the pen. Ink scratched against paper. When it was done, Cassian took the signed page and nodded once. It's over, he said. But Corbin's smile returned, thin and cruel. Not yet. He lunged for the gun hidden beneath his coat. Cassian fired first. The report echoed through the stone halls, loud as thunder. Corbin staggered, eyes wide, and fell against the desk. The bottle tipped, spilling whiskey across the floor. Cassian lowered the rifle, breathing hard. Elara reached for him, her hand trembling. You did what you had to. He looked at her, not triumphant, not relieved, just tired. Maybe, he said softly, but every time I pull a trigger, the desert gets a little quieter. She touched his arm. Then maybe it's time to stop listening to the silence. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over Red Mesa. They walked out together, leaving the ledger and the dead man behind. The wind rose, scattering papers into the open sky. Cassian turned to her. What now? Elara looked east, where the sun burned through the last of the storm. Now we live like the truth means something. If this story has carved its way into your heart, stay close. The dawn's just beginning to rise. Like, share, or comment if your soul believes redemption can still bloom from dust beneath the western sky. The wind swept between them, carrying the scent of rain and blood. Cassian reached for her hand, and for the first time she didn't pull away. Come on, he said quietly. Let's go home. Morning rose slow and gold over the wide plains. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean, the kind of quiet that comes only after something hard has finally broken. Cassian and Elara rode side by side through the soft light, their horses' hooves sinking into wet sand that glittered like glass. Behind them, Red Mesa lay still, no smoke, no shouts. Only the long echo of justice that had finally been heard. Cassian's coat was torn, blood dried along his sleeve, but his posture was easier now, lighter somehow. He hadn't said much since they left. Elara didn't need him to. Some silences carried peace, not pain. They crested a small ridge overlooking the valley below. The land stretched open, green shoots rising where the rain had soaked deep. Elara pulled her horse to a stop, the wind tugging at her hair. "This looks like freedom," she said quietly. Cassian smiled faintly. "Never thought I'd see it again." She turned toward him. "What happens now? You could ride anywhere. No one left to chase you. No more ghosts to follow." He studied the horizon. "Maybe I'll build something that doesn't need a gun to keep standing." He paused, his voice softening. "Maybe you could too." She looked down at her hands, the fingers that had held ledgers and revolvers, truths and lies. "Maybe," she said, "but I don't even know what peace looks like anymore." He shifted closer, his tone low, almost tender. "It looks a lot like this." She glanced at him, the corners of her mouth curving in a way that caught the sunlight. "You always this sure of yourself, Holt?" He shook his head, smiling for real this time. "Not until you stopped running." They rode on for a while without speaking, the land opening wider ahead. No fences, no signs, just sky and wind. When they reached a shallow stream cutting through the plain, Cassian dismounted and knelt to drink. Elara followed, kneeling beside him. The water was cold, alive, clean. She looked at their reflections, scarred faces, eyes marked by fire and dust, yet still human. "We could go east," she said. "Start over where no one knows our names." Cassian lifted his gaze to hers. "You really think a place can make us new?" "No," she whispered, "but maybe it can let us try." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was simple, unhurried, the kind that said more than promises ever could. "I never meant to find you," he said. "I never meant to be found," she answered. They both smiled, small and broken and whole at once. For a long moment, they stayed like that, two souls who had walked through fire and come out the other side with ash in their lungs and light in their eyes. Then Elara stood, glancing toward the horizon. "Cassian?" "Yeah?" "What if one day someone else comes looking?" He rose beside her, the dawn burning bright behind him. "Then they'll find two riders instead of one." The wind lifted, scattering dust across their boots. The world smelled of rain and sun and beginning. They mounted again. Elara glanced at him, the faintest glimmer of warmth in her eyes. "Where to first?" Cassian grinned. "Wherever the sky looks clean enough to start over." They turned their horses east. The light stretched long across the sand, their shadows riding ahead. Two figures bound not by chains, but by the hard-earned quiet of forgiveness. For the first time in a long time, neither of them looked back. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, let your light stay with us. Comment, share, and subscribe so this Western fire keeps burning for you. Because every trail, no matter how long or lost, deserves a dawn